Let's get the video too. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Good to see everybody. Back for another class. So we're gonna discuss today. So last week we covered Maliki Yawmiddin. Actually, the last couple weeks, because we went over Malik, the meaning of Malik, and the root words Malaka. And last week we talked a lot about the word Adin and the phrase Yawmuddin. So now we want to move to the next ayah in al-faatihah, which is iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in, which is often translated as you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. I want to see, I think I can, I know I can, but oh yeah, I see, okay. I just want to see how to do it. So I'm going to write something in the chat as we talk because I want to show you something really quick. So in al-faatihah, I could explain it, but sometimes I think it's easier if you can look at it. So in al-faatihah, right, when we say iyyaaka na'budu, and then we translate that as you alone we worship. Why do we phrase it like we do? Why do we say iyyaaka na'budu? Like, what's the meaning of iyyaaka? So I want to talk about that first. So let me see if I can write this in the chat for you to see. So we have iyyaaka na'budu. Iyyaaka na'budu. Can everyone see that? Oh, I didn't type everyone. I don't know if I have to do that. Can everyone see that? Let me know if you can't. So I'm assuming everyone can.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it.
Good. All right. Awesome. So, iyyaaka na'budu. So let's break this phrase down. I'm going to type some other things in here for you. So, we worship is na'budu. So when we say na'budu, that means we worship. Okay? Na'budu. So what is the iyyaaka part? So I want to just break it down for you piece by piece. So na'budu, we worship. What is the part of that indicates we? It's the na part. Okay? So that's we. The other part comes from the root word is abada, the root word for worship. Okay. So abada is the root word for worship. So when we put the na with abada and we get na'budu, that means we worship. Okay. Now where does the iyyaaka come from? And where does the translation of you alone we worship, where does that come from? So let's talk about that. So iyyaaka, let's take this apart piece by piece. The ka part means you singular masculine. Okay. Now what I mean by the ka is you singular masculine. In English, when we use the word you, it could mean it could mean a variety of different things, right? Just with the word you, it can mean for one person. I could say you to one person. I can say you to two people. I can say you to three or more people. So you is flexible in English. Just the word you, we don't have to change it. We can use you to refer to one person up to multiple different people. However, in Arabic, it's not the same. In Arabic, the you is very specific as to who it's talking to. So if it's addressed in the first instance, and I say in the first instance because someone might think we had this discussion, I think, on one of our TikTok lives, where they were saying when the Quran tells us qum, for example, ya ayyuhal muddathir qum fa'andir, O the one that's wrapped up in garments, stand or arise and warn. Qum fa'andir. The qum is the masculine singular, the masculine singular of the order form, meaning to stand. So does that mean it only refers to the Prophet Muhammad? Somebody asked that question. So I would say no, because it's talking to the individual reader. It's talking to the Prophet Muhammad in the first instance when it's revealed, right? but it's not necessarily limiting only to the Prophet Muhammad in every instance, right? So that's something to keep in mind when we talk about gender and stuff like that in the Quran, that every word is either masculine or feminine. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's always just talking to a female, like biological female or biological male. So here, the ka part, the you singular masculine, is for Allah. It's talking to Allah. And it's you singular masculine. That's just the way it is grammatically. That doesn't mean that Allah is like a biological male, or we think of Allah in terms of a gender. That's just how it's phrased grammatically. It's used, the masculine term in the Quran is used. And that's a whole different discussion. We could talk about why why is the masculine pronouns used for Allah, like huwa, he, for example. But that could be a whole different class. But just something to keep in mind, that whether or not the word itself is masculine or feminine is a function of the grammar. It doesn't necessarily just mean that the thing itself being referred to is male or female. So the ka is you singular masculine. It's addressing grammatically a single masculine object. Now, where does the iyyaaka come from? Okay, so I thought I brought some water with me, but I guess I didn't. My mouth's dry. But so where does the iyyaaka come from? So normally, so when we talk about pronouns, this is another thing I want to explain. So pronouns. What is a pronoun? Pronouns. Pronouns are words. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Are words that take. Yes. Oh, I thought somebody was talking to me. Pronouns are words that take the place of nouns. So, meaning, if you're telling a story and you say, "Well, I went to, we had this Discord class with Ben, and then he talked about this." So he is a pronoun that replaces or takes the place of the noun, which would be my name in that case, Ben. So you say Ben, and in order to keep having to keep repeating the same word over and over again, like the word Ben over and over again, you replace it with he. So a pronoun takes the place of a noun. Does that make sense so far? If any of it doesn't make sense, please let me know. So now, when you have pronouns in Arabic, pronouns can be attached or detached in Arabic. So attached or detached, what that means is if I want to use a pronoun as like the subject of a sentence. So if I want to say, let me think of an example. If I want to just say like you are good, for example, or you are smart, and I'm talking to a singular male. If I want to say you are smart, then I would use the detached form. I would say anta. So anta is a singular male pronoun. So I would say anta, and then I would say dhaki, you are smart. So anta dhaki equals you are smart. Anta dhaki. That's just an example of a detached pronoun. Why do we call it detached? Because it stands by itself as the subject of the sentence. So it's not attached to any word. It's the subject of the sentence. The subject meaning what the main thing in the sentence is. So here the main thing is you. I'm talking to you, anta, whoever I'm talking to, and I'm giving information about you, which is that you are smart. Anta dhaki. So dhaki, the smart part of the sentence, is the predicate, what we would call the predicate, or the information about the subject. So that would be called a detached pronoun. Okay. Now, the attached pronouns are used when you want to, for a couple different reasons, but one of them is when you want to make it the object of a verb. Okay. So notice here, the detached pronoun is for when the pronoun is the subject of the sentence. Okay. The attached pronoun is for when the pronoun is the object of the verb. So normally what I would say, if I wanted to say we worship you, right? We worship you, and I'm talking to Allah. The normal word construction for this in Arabic would be na'buduka. Na'buduka. That would be the normal construction. The ka is an attached pronoun, and it would be here the object of the verb na'budu, meaning we worship. So I would be saying we worship you. Okay? That's the normal way that we phrase it in Arabic. So that's why it's an attached pronoun, because it goes attached to the word. It can't be by itself. So now, why do we say in al-faatihah iyyaaka na'bud? Why do we not say na'buduka wa nasta'inuka? Why do we say iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in? Why do we say it the other way? So what is the iyya? So the iyya, that part, they actually have a fancy like grammatical name for it. In English, I mean, I'm trying to remember what they call it. I forget exactly what they call it, but basically the iyya is present in order to be able to attach the pronoun to something. So it's a word, if you want to call it that, or a phrase, or I guess a word is the best thing we can call it for right now. I was trying to think of a different way to describe it. They have a term for it. I meant to look it up, but I forgot. But it's something that's there to give us something to attach the pronoun to. So the attached pronoun ka, it normally has to be at the end of the verb. You have to say na'buduka wa nasta'inuka. But if we want to take that pronoun off of the verb and put it before the verb, and why would we put it before the verb? There's a reason for that. So when you put something ahead like that, when you change the normal word order of a sentence in any way, right? First of all, you're creating a new meaning by just rearranging the words. So the meaning of an ayah or the meaning of a phrase in the Quran, we don't just know that just from the meanings of the words. We also know that by rearranging or how the sentence itself is ordered. So we can look at the grammatical order of the sentence and we can learn a lot of things about the meaning just from that. So the normal word order is na'buduka wa nasta'inuka. That's how you would normally say it. But if we want to put the pronoun before the verb in order to enhance the meaning in some way, then we have to use iyya, because the pronoun ka has to be attached to something. You can't just say ka na'budu by itself. It has to be attached to something. So the iyya is there to carry the pronoun, basically. Iyyaka na'budu. So we're able to detach the pronoun and put it in front, but it's technically still an attached pronoun because it has to go onto something, right? Not like anta, you, has to be just, it can be just by itself. It doesn't have to be attached. If we say enta or enti or entum, any of the detached pronouns. But when it comes to ka and any attached pronoun, it has to go on to something. So that's why we say iyyaaka. Now, why would we change the word order like that? Why would we put the ka in front? Why would we say, so technically what we're saying is, you we worship. So instead of saying na'buduka, we worship you, we're saying iyyaka na'budu, you we worship. So generally, a good rule of thumb with Arabic sentences, and especially sentences from the Quran, is that whenever the word order is changed and something is brought forward in the sentence and something is put later, it's usually a good rule of thumb that the thing that you're putting first acquires more importance in meaning. So we put it first because we're trying to emphasize the meaning more. Follow me? So if I just said na'buduka, we worship you, just by itself, that doesn't necessarily negate that we worship you and we worship other than you, right? Because we worship you. But if we change the word order and we say iyyaka na'budu. Now the you acquires more exclusivity because we're putting it forward and emphasizing it more. And we're saying, you we worship, like only you. And that's one of the things we benefit by changing the word order. So that's why a lot of times this is translated as you alone we worship, because the you precedes it. Iyyaaka na'budu instead of na'buduka. And iyyaaka nasta'in instead of nasta'inuka. So you we seek help from. So that's the first, I think, really important point to understand about this, is that the word order, the way this ayat is phrased, is very important. So the next thing that we want to talk about is, now we're saying you alone we worship, na'budu. So what's the meaning of ibadah or abada? The root word is abada. Or the ayn, the bel, the ba, and the del. I mixed them together. Abada. So what's the meaning of this? So basically, I'll write that. Actually, I'm glad, I don't know why I didn't do this before. I'm glad we have this chat to make the notes. I think that's even better than having a whiteboard. So, abada means, basically in Arabic, they say it means tadhallul. Uh-oh, something popped in my way, so I can't type. Let me close that. Okay. Tadhallul. That's the basic meaning that they say. And Hannah was typing something, so I'm waiting to see if maybe she has a comment or a question, a follow-up question, because hopefully everything that I explained was clear. If anything wasn't clear, if anything is ever not clear, just ask. You're cursing in the wrong place. All right. Just making sure. Yeah, just ask if anything's not clear. So, at-tadhallul. At-tadhallul. So what is at-tadhallul? Basically, you can use different words to translate this, but to be lowered, submissive, etc. Things of that nature, right? So one of the ways that we use this in Arabic is we say tariq mu'abbad. So this is a phrase we have in Arabic, tariq mu'abbad. So the word tariq means a path. So tariq equals path. What does mu'abbad signify here? So mu'abbad signifies, if you go back to the root meaning, which is tadhallul, so something to be lowered or submissive, a path that is mu'abbad means a path that has been lowered or paved, something like that. So meaning, from people walking on it, let's say if it's a footpath, you know how like you might go through like a wooded area and a path might have been made through there just by people going through and like clearing the branches and then walking over it, and eventually, or if you walk through some grass, if people take a path through some grass long enough, it'll wear actually a path. It'll like wear, kill the grass and like wear a path where the grass was. So that in Arabic is tariq mu'abbad. It's a path that's been made mu'abbad, been made available, been made lowered, submissive, able to walk on, paved, right? So that's some of where the root meaning of being lowered comes from, though, is that a path in Arabic is mu'abbad. So it's something that's been lowered and able to walk on. Now, what I think is a really beautiful way from that, like springboarding from that, what I think is a really beautiful way to start off thinking about what it means to do ibadah. That word pattern is other places. I don't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, there are some other places though that we could probably study like separately as a whole study. Like what are the places that uses specifically this pattern? But so like tariq mu'abbad is a good place, I think, to start off thinking about what abada or ibadah means. The word that we often translate as worship. and what it means to be an abd, what it means to be. This word is translated in a bunch of different ways. It's translated as servant, sometimes as slave, sometimes as worshiper. So what exactly does that mean? So, like I said, I think tariq mu'abbad, a path that is mu'abbad, is a good place to start thinking about that, because you have a path that's lowered that facilitates people's ability to be able to walk on it. So I think that's a really good way to think about it, because as an abd, if I'm trying to be an abd of Allah, then what I'm trying to do is lower my own self, lower my own ego. Like this goes with a lot of things we've talked about in our other classes about Iblis and Shaitan and arrogance and making oneself big and all that type of stuff. That perhaps one of the first things about being an abd, or fulfilling this idea of na'budu, we worship, we do ibadah, is it's a lowering of one's own self and ego, and allowing that divine energy that Allah represents to flow through you like a path. So you become a path for divine energy, that it flows through you. So it permeates your life and it permeates those around you. And that's by you lowering your own self, you lowering the things that are blocking that path. Just like any channel or path, right? Things can block that path. So one of the things that will block that for us is our own egos getting in the way, right? So our goal is to try to become more and more pure in letting that energy flow through us. And that's the next point that we want to talk about. Look how many verses couple ibadah, or some version of that, what we translate as worship. Personally, and I keep saying what we translate as worship, because I hope that from this class we can try to think of this word in a deeper way. Because when you say worship, for a lot of people that word has certain connotations. So worship to them might mean going, depending on who you're talking to, it might mean going to church, it might mean going to the masjid, it might mean praying, it might mean fasting. People have a lot of different ways of thinking about that. But if we think about this in a deeper way, that lowering, right? Lowering of your defenses, lowering of your ego, lowering these bad qualities that we tend to hold on to, right? And all in an effort to become available and open for the teachings of Allah in our life, in our lives, right? I think that's a way deeper way to think about it personally. That's hard to sum up in just one like English word. So let's look at a couple verses. So let's look at 39:14. So we'll go with 39:14. Hannah beat me to it. I was thinking, I wonder if I should type this or if Hannah's going to still type it. I looked up and it said Hannah's typing. It's like, man, she's about her business. So 39:14. So we've been going through al-faatihah pretty much like one line at a time, or sometimes one half of a line. Like the last 2 weeks we took Maliki Yawmiddin and broke it into halves, like one half one week and one half the other week. So yeah, we're basically going an ayat at a time. Our intention is to keep going through Surah al-Baqarah too. But whatever we can, inshallah, whatever we can study, as someone remarked when I was talking about potentially doing a live where we try to recite the Quran in like 3 days, somebody said, quality is better than quantity. And I agree with that. So I think like even if it takes us a long time to study a word or study an ayah, we get so much more out of it. And in fact, we end up studying so much else about the Quran, because everything connects together. So even though we're studying one ayah or one concept or sometimes one word, in reality we're studying a lot of other things too. Alhamdulillah, for sure. I'm glad you do. Okay, so I was saying that potentially part of ibadah is trying to purify ourselves of all of those things that will block that energy from flowing through us and for us becoming a path. So let's look at a couple verses that connect the idea of completely being free of impurities to the idea of ibadah. So in Surah Az-Zumar 39:14, he says, قُلِ اللَّهَ أَعْبُدُ مُخْلِصًا لَهُ دِينِي. Say, it is Allah, alhamdulillah, it is Allah that I do ibadah of, mukhlisan lahu dini, being mukhlis, being pure, mukhlisan, free of any impurities, purifying, sincerely. You can translate that word in a few different ways, from khalasa. So here's an interesting thing about this word, because we're going to run across it a couple times. So he's saying, I worship Allah, I do ibadah, mukhlisan lahu dini, making my deen mukhlis. So what is this word mukhlis? So first of all, we have the word mukhlis, right? And sometimes it's translated as sincere, which is not bad. But if we look at the root khalasa, khalasa. So here's a very interesting point. Now, in a lot of our classes, we've talked about the meanings that could be derived from the letters. That it's not just the meaning of the word itself. Yeah, it could be alone, potentially. Yeah, alone. I think it can encompass all of those meanings. Because like I was saying, we've talked about the meanings that can be derived from the letters, right? So in Arabic, if we have this word here, khalata, khalata, almost the same word, but except it has the letter ta, mixed, exactly. Khalata means mixed. So look at that. Khalasa versus khalata. Khalasa, khalata. I don't believe, like, there's so many examples in the Quran like that, where words relate to each other in a similar way, where they're only different by like one letter or sometimes a vowel. It happens so much that I really do believe this is a characteristic of Arabic words, and especially the words of the Quran, that when you have letters, or you have words, that have very similar letters, but might be different by like one letter, that they have an interrelated meaning. Like, did you ever think about, for those that know Arabic or know a little bit about Arabic, did you ever think about all of the particles of negation? Like whenever you negate something, right? So if you say no, no is what? La, right? So you have la equals no, right? Now, if you want to negate something and say it hasn't happened yet, what do you say? Lam. Like lam is like has not. Now, is that a coincidence? That to say no is la, and then to say something has not, to negate the occurrence of something, you say lam. So you still have the lam and the fatha, but now you add a meme. And if you negate something in the future, like you say will not, how do you say that? Len. So len is will not, right? And then if you want to like negate or correct something that came before, like in a sentence, you want to, like, for example, in the Quran it says, ما كان محمد آباء أحد من رجالكم. Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. ولكن, rather, Rasulullah, or however, or but, Rasulullah, he is the messenger of Allah, وخاتم النبيين, and the seal of the prophets. So, see how lakin negates what came before it, right? It corrects. They say in Arabic, they say istidrak. It corrects what came before it, but it's a kind of negation if you think about it, because he said Muhammad isn't the father of any men from amongst you. Walakin, rather, meaning instead of this is what he is. And so how do you say that? You say lakin. So lakin could be but, however, it could be rather, right? Now look at that. These are the particles of negation. La, lam, len, lakin. Am I missing any? Lemma. Lemma is one. Lemma is interesting because lemma basically means has not, but is likely to. So lemma, they say there's a long discussion in Arabic grammar about the difference between lem and lemma. So one opinion, and there's probably different ways to think about it. So this is not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea, one opinion is that lem has not, is just negating the occurrence of something, like that something has not happened. But lemma is negating that something has not happened, but it's expected to happen. That's why I said is likely to. So for example, in Surah Al-Hujurat, he says, when he said, قالت الأعراب آمنا, the A'rab said, we have believed. قل لم تؤمنوا, قل لم تؤمنوا. Say, you have not believed. لم تؤمنوا. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Is that what comes next? Let me make sure I'm remembering that right. Yeah, I knew I was skipping a part. Look, you have all three negations in one ayat. He says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. The A'rab say, we have believed. قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. Say, you have not believed. لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. وَلَكِنْ. However, so istidrak, you have not believed. Rather, this is the case. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Rather say, we have submitted. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلُ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And Iman has not yet, they translate this as, has not yet entered your heart. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ. He didn't say, وَلَمْ يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ. He didn't say, Iman has not entered your heart. He said, وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ. Iman has not yet entered your heart. So you see, like, there's a lot of interrelationship and connection between these words. And they all begin with lam and fatha. La, lam, len, lakin, lemma. So, is that a coincidence? To me, I don't think so. I think many examples like this, where you can see a relationship between words that have very similar letters. Many examples in the Quran. Another good example is when we say land and sea. Bar equals, this is in the Quran, land, and bahr equals sea. Bar is land, bahr is sea. Now look at the similarity of these letters, or of these words. Bar is ba, ra, and ra, because it's a shadda ra, so it's like doubled. Bar, right? And think about that, because the land, the ra has a rolling sound. And the land is something that you can continuously move on, right? It's if you're on a piece of land, it's an unbroken thing that you can go across. You can traverse. But bahr, notice that one of the ra's from bar has been replaced with the open letter ha, bahr, which maybe indicates the openness and expansiveness of the oceans and the seas, and the depths that go into them, and the fact that you just can't go from land and just cross them without, using something. You can't just walk across them. And then maybe also the mysteriousness of how many things are contained within the oceans and the seas that we still haven't discovered, right? So it's interesting that you have bar with that rolling sound for the land, and for the openness and mysteriousness of the sea, you have that open sound in the middle. Bahr. Right? So is that a coincidence? So there's so many examples that it makes you think, like, and always Allah knows best. We can't say 100% for sure, but it makes you think that when you see words like that, that's something that you should utilize. It's a tool you should utilize to help you understand the meanings. So I explained that because going back to mukhlisan, you have the word khalasa and khalata, right? Which I mentioned earlier. So I'll write that again. Khalasa and khalata, right? So khalata means to mix. Khalata means to mix. So if khalata means to mix, then khalasa means something that is unmixed, unadulterated. There's nothing mixed with it. Follow my point? So that's an easy way to understand the words, right? So when he says here, mukhlisan, qulillahu, qulillaha, a'budu. And actually, by the way, in this verse 39:14 that we're reading right now, this is another example of what I explained in the beginning when I said, why do we put the ka before na'budu? Iyyaaka na'budu is to show exclusivity. You alone we worship, to emphasize the you. This is a good example here in 39:14 because notice how if you listen to it in Arabic, Allah is put before the verb. Qul Allah a'budu. Qulillaha a'budu. Say Allah, I worship. Meaning, I'm emphasizing Allah because you could say it the other way. In some ayat, do actually an ayat right here, ayat 11 says that. Qul inni umirtu an a'bud Allah. Say I have been ordered to that I worship Allah. That's in ayah 11. But in ayah 14, the order is changed. Qulillaha a'budu. So that's another example of what I said in the beginning about al-faatihah wa iyyaaka na'budu. Okay? So here, qulillaha a'budu mukhlisan lahu dini. So making my deen mukhlisan lahu. Mukhlis for him. Or me making my deen mukhlis for him. So now if we think about the relationship here between khalata and khalasa, khalata being to mix, khalasa being unmixed, unadulterated. So mukhlisan lahu dini, meaning that I worship him without anything being mixed with it. So that's the ideal, that's the goal. Mukhlisan. So that goes back to what we talked about earlier, that ibadah or abada comes from tariq mu'abbad, the path that has been lowered. So we're trying to lower ourselves and to let that energy flow through us and to let those teachings and principles and morals flow through us. But what blocks that from happening is anything that we have in the way, our ego, bad qualities, whatever it might be. So we're trying to lower those things, and in lowering those things, we're becoming mukhlis. That's the ideal. That's what we're going towards. Trying to be more and more mukhlis in all ways. So a lot of times they translate this as sincere, right? But sincerity, sincere is not a bad translation, but I feel like it's only giving us one dimension of the meaning, because sincerity is usually thought of as far as being truthful in your intentions, right? And that's one thing. But mukhlisan encompasses any mixture. So mixing with your own self with it, your own ego, your own bad qualities, the temptations of the world, whatever it might be that we would mix with it, that would make that channel of being an abd, that channel that energy is supposed to flow through, obstructed, then that's the opposite of being mukhlis. So the ideal that we're working towards is to be more and more mukhlis, to be more and more, to have that channel opened up more and more, to have that path laid down more and more, to make it easier to flow through. Also, if we go to, same chapter, I forgot there's some verses at the beginning that have a similar meaning. So when we go to 39, so we're in chapter 39. So when we go to 39:2, he says, Inna anzalna ilayka al-kitaba bil-haqqi. We have sent down upon you al-kitab, the book, with truth. فَعْبُدِ اللَّهَ مُخْلِصًا لَهُ الدِّينَ. So, as like meaning as a result of that, fa'abud. So, as a result of that, do ibadah of Allah mukhlisan lahu ad-din, making the deen mukhlisan lahu, without any mixtures, right? But notice how in this verse, the idea of ibadah is connected with al-kitab bil-haq. And al-kitab, as we've talked about in some previous classes, maybe one of the meanings of al-kitab from the word kataba has to do with the laws and the principles. Like when we talk about what is the difference between al-kitab and al-Quran, for example. Why in some ayat does he use the word al-kitab? In some ayat he uses the word al-Quran, or some ayat he uses the word al-kitab and he uses al-hikmah, like where he says yu'allimuhum al-kitaba wal-hikmah. He teaches them al-kitab and al-hikmah, the book and the wisdom. So one potential way to think about al-kitab is the laws and the principles. Because if you look at this word in the Quran, for example, when it talks about fasting, and fasting being prescribed upon us, what wording does it use? Kutiba, from the word kitab, kataba, from the same root. Kutiba, meaning you could translate it was written, right? It was written upon you. Kutiba, right? But usually they say prescribed upon you. Prescribed, obligated, written, decreed. Like kutiba, kataba, a lot of times is translated in many different ways. So potentially, like when you see those relationships, other verses also in Surah Al-Baqarah where fasting is talked about as being kutiba. There's kutiba alaykum al-qisasu fil qatla. In people that have been slain, kutiba alaykum al-qisas. This law of al-qisas was kutiba upon you. Kutiba alaykum al-wasiyya. The will has been prescribed upon you. So when you look at this word kutiba, it gives the feeling, Allah knows best, that potentially when we talk about al-kitab, that's why he says yu'allimuhum al-kitaba wal-hikmah, the kitab and the wisdom. Dhalika al-kitab, yeah, for sure. In the beginning of Al-Baqarah, dhalika al-kitab. So potentially when he says al-kitab wal-hikmah, for example, he's telling us, he's teaching them rules and principles, right? But he's also teaching them wisdom, because you have to have both. Those people that we see that only focus on law and technicality and rules and principles, but don't have wisdom, they tend to do a lot of harm with other people, with how they present information. So you're in need of both. You're in need of the rules and the principles, but also the wisdom in how to apply that and how to convey that, and how to live that. So here he says, Inna anzalna ilayka al-kitaba bil-haqqi fa'budillaha mukhlisan lahu din. He says, we have sent to you al-kitab, so the collection of morals, principles, things of that nature, with truth. So do ibadah of Allah mukhlisan lahu din, making all of that unmixed, unadulterated, right? And even using the word ad-din here, ad-din. Ad-din is very interesting here because ad-din relates to laws and principles. So the reason I say that, let's go to 1246, and that will explain it more. 1246. No, I think I wrote the wrong. Oh no, 1240. Sorry, 1240. I wrote the right one, but I couldn't read my own handwriting. Sorry, Hannah, about that. It's 1240. So in 1240 he says, "Ma ta'buduna min dunihi illa asma'an sammaytumuha." You don't do ibadah. Ma ta'buduna. You don't do ibadah min dunihi, from other than him. Illa asma'an sammaytumuha, except for names that you have named. This is what you're doing ibadah of. Not anything real, but names that you name. You're channeling. So you can apply that same thing. You're channeling the energy based on names that you made that have no reality behind them. That's the energy that you're trying to channel. Antum wa aba'ukum, you and your fathers, ma anzalallahu biha min sultan, that Allah has not sent down any authority for, meaning these names. In al hukmu illa lillah, the judgment is only for Allah. Amara alla ta'budu illa iyyah, He ordered that you worship none except Him. Illa iyyahu, illa iyyahu. So that Aziz, you asked about that construction. It's in this verse. Amara alla ta'budu illa iyyahu. He ordered that you do not worship except Him. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ, that is the upright deen. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, however, most people don't know. So you see how he connected these words together here, right? مَا تَعْبُدُونَ, you don't worship except these. Then he said, إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ, the judgment is only for Allah. أَمَرَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهِ, he ordered that you don't worship any except for Him. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ, that is the upright deen. So the deen has to do with hukm, has to do with judgments and principles, but I mean in a broader sense, right? Because a lot of people would take that in a very like narrow sense, and sometimes overly focus on technicalities, like all these like very technical rules and things like that. I don't mean rules and principles in that sense. I mean more like in a moral sense. For example, Inna Allah ya'murukum bil adli. Allah ordered you with justice. Allah orders you with al-adl, justice, fairness, and equality. So that's a moral principle, right? Perhaps these are the things that are part of al-kitab, like the laws and the principles, right? These are things that are part of ad-deen. And in channeling these principles, that's how we become an abd. We try to channel these principles, like principles of justice and fairness. Or when he says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, we haven't sent you except as a mercy to all of the worlds. So mercy is a principle, is a moral. Compassion is a moral that he gave us. So justice, compassion, stuff like that. We're trying to become an abd by becoming a channel for those things. Where when people interact with us and when we interact with society, we do so in a way to channel justice and compassion and mercy and kindness and ihsan, doing things in the most beautiful way, and all these different beautiful qualities without mukhlisan lahuddin, being sincere, but also not mixing anything else with them, like not mixing agendas, not mixing our ego, because that's what stops us from being able to be that kind of an abd that's channeling justice or channeling mercy or compassion, because we have other things mixed with that, right? We have our own ego mixed with that. Sometimes our own wants, needs, our own agendas, which stops us from being just and fair towards other people. So, and I'm sure we all have those things to one degree or the other. So we're not talking about it in the sense to say any of us are perfect or any of us have achieved that goal. But we're just saying that's the goal that we want to aspire to become that type of an abd, that we are mukhlisan, we are unadulterated and unmixed in our ibadah, that we channel these principles of love and justice and mercy and compassion and all these beautiful characteristics that Allah teaches us in the Quran, which is our deen. And I want to add to this a couple other verses real quick. So if we go to 40:14. So 40:14. He says, فَدَعُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. So in this verse, instead of saying using the word ibadah, he uses a variation of the word da'a or du'a, which is usually translated as supplication or to call upon, but could literally mean to invite. So that's why we say to call, because you're inviting. فَدَعُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. Invite Allah or call Allah, making the deen mukhlis for Him. So I just wanted to show another ayah that connected ad-din, the idea of ad-din, with the idea of mukhlis or mukhlisin. So now another point before we end for the day that I want to mention, why I think this is really important, is when we say iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in. So that's the second component. Because this goal that we're trying to achieve, to become this kind of an abd, to become this kind of a channel through which this divine energy can flow, that's not an easy ideal to achieve, to become mukhlis, where we don't have all these other things mixed with it. That's a high level. That's not easy to achieve. So we also say in this ayah, iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in. And you alone we also seek help. Okay. Now, we probably won't be able to cover this because it's 1:53 and I want to make sure I make the live too. So we probably won't be able to totally cover this, but I want to mention something just to start with, and then we'll pick back up on this next week. So what I want to mention is, if you look in the Quran of the things that Allah tells us, because here he's saying, we do isti'ana, we seek help with you. If you look in the Quran to the things that he tells us to seek help with, he says, for example, 2 times, ista'inu bis sabri was salah. Seek help with patience and salah. And in another ayah, 1 time, Musa, he quotes Musa as telling his people, ista'inu billahi wasbiru. Seek help with Allah and be patient. So I want you to think about this. We're going to pick back up on this next week in more detail. But just I want you to give you this little piece to think about. So he tells us in al-faatihah, wa iyyaaka nasta'in. And then, so we seek help. But then when we look at other verses of what exact things does he tell us to seek help with, we find 2 verses that say, ista'inu bis sabri was salah. Seek help with patience and salah. Right? So how does that coincide with you we seek help with? And then 2 times we find that. And then 1 time, Musa tells his people, ista'inu billahi wasbiru. Seek help with Allah and be patient. So in Fatiha, we seek help. 2 times we seek help with patience and salah. And 1 time, seek help with Allah and patience. So I think all of those are talking about the same thing, but just in different ways. So when we say we seek help, and when Musa says seek help with Allah and patience, right? And then in other ayat where we say seek help with patience and salah, notice the common thing in all of those verses is patience, right? They all have the word patience. But the word that differs is 1 time it says 1 time it says Allah, 2 times it says salah. So that makes sense though, because salah is our connection with Allah. You follow what I'm saying? So they're overlapping meanings, right? And that's something that we want to go further in, because now the next question is, but if that's the case, does that mean salah isn't part of ibadah? Let's think about this question, what I'm asking, because when we say iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in, we do ibadah of, and we seek help from. So if seeking help has to do with salah, because in other ayat he says ista'inu bis sabri was salah, then can we make the conclusion that ibadah and salah are actually 2 different things? And therefore, the way that we usually think of ibadah as just a general term for any kind of, as we phrase it, worship, and we include within that salah, might not be the correct way of thinking about ibadah. And salah, both. So let me present this verse in support of that these are actually 2 separate things. And then we'll talk about this more next week, inshallah. This is in the story of Musa, actually, in chapter 20, verse 14. So chapter 20, verse 14, he says, this is Allah addressing Musa. He says, Innani ana Allahu, la ilaha illa ana. He says, I am Allah. There is no God except I. Fa'budni, so worship me. Wa aqimis salata li dhikri, and establish the salah for my remembrance. He tells him two things. Fa'budni wa aqimis salata li dhikri. Worship me. I was thinking about the 14 between the last two, but no, I didn't think about that. The 39 one. Thank you for putting that there. That is something I want to think about. That's a good catch right there. So worship me and establish the salah for my remembrance. Follow me? So in this ayat, he separates them. Worship me and establish the salah, right? So I think that's a good supporting evidence to say in the Fatihah, when we think of iyyaaka na'budu wa iyyaaka nasta'in, ibadah is one thing, and isti'ana, the seeking of help by patience and by salah, or by our connection to Allah, is something different. And here he says, establish the salah for my remembrance. So if ibadah is connected to the deen and the laws, the principles and morals that are connected in the deen and al-kitab, if that's what ibadah is, to lower ourselves, to take that upon us, right? And the establishment of salah is for my remembrance, as he says here, then as-salah is maintaining that connection with Allah in order to remember the principles. So therefore we can channel the principles. So they work together, but they might not necessarily be the same thing. And Allah knows best. That's our class for the day. Well, for this, but inshallah, I'll see you on TikTok live in a minute, hopefully. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.